Hello and welcome everybody. Good to see so many familiar faces here. My name's Jason Meyer, for those of you who don't know, and I'd like to welcome you to the first in a series of four sketch clubs. We're going to be talking about trees in this sketch club. This is going to prepare us for a workshop that's coming up at the end of this month, and it will remain a little video series here on YouTube for a little while. So I'd like to first, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a very short, I think it's about a minute and a half introduction video. And then from there, we're going to go to Procreate and clarify tonight's point. And then we're going to jump over to our sketch pads and sketch some of the ideas that we're talking about. So it looks like Susan's here. I see Claudia and Janny. And it's so good to see anybody. Yeah, Claudia says, hi, Izzy. That's what I say. We live in the same house and hardly see her. You'd think she was a teenager or something. You guys wouldn't recognize her. Anyway, so we're going to get to the video. Right after the video, we'll jump into Procreate, and we'll go from there. Trees are one of the most interesting things to sketch. Each has its own personality and story. You can find more interesting characters in trees than even in the best literature. They can be the center of attention or the supporting actor, framing a scene, focusing the viewer's attention. Yet, even with such a wide variety of characteristics and roles, we can visually trace it all back to the simple cylinder. Artists see the scene in the simplest shapes possible in order to manage and design the shapes before they elaborate with any detail. In this series of 4 sketch clubs, we will see it simply, adjust the simple shapes, breathe life into your shapes, and we'll finish with the sketching process, bringing it all together. Okay, so that's basically the overview of what we're going to cover. This is going to be very short. Each sketch club will be about half an hour. And as you guys probably know, that'll go super fast. So tonight we're going to talk about seeing it simply. And we have to see these things simply so that in our mind we can very easily move things as well as on our paper or on our canvas. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with an old growth oak. Just happens to be sitting over a studio that I frequent quite often of a good friend of mine. And if we zoom in here on the main trunk, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to pay attention to basically this right here. Okay, so let's just break that down tonight into its simplest terms. And when we start, most of you are probably going to be thinking, really? But stay with me, because I imagine within 5 or 10 minutes you're going to be going, oh, there's a lot more to this than it first appears. So let's have a look. If we were to break this down into the simple rectangles, we don't even have to say cylinders yet, but just simple rectangles, what would it look like? Well, we'd get something like that, right? Which is interesting in and of itself. But what I'd like to do tonight is I would like to clarify these rectangles into cylinders. And I want to clarify them into cylinders in 3-dimensional space. In other words, what we have right now is very 2-dimensional. but we don't know if this is coming forward or going back. We don't know if this is coming forward or going back, right? There's a lot of information that we don't know yet. So how are we going to pull that information out? And I propose we use the simple cylinder, right? So what does these cylinders tell us? Well, it tells us that we're leaning to the left. And then look at the bottom. You don't see the bottom, do you? But you see the top. Okay, so what that tells us is that these are actually coming towards us. Okay, that shape of the cylinders coming towards us. If it was going away from us, then we would see the top like that and the bottom like so. So this end is closest to us, and in this one, this end is closest to us. Okay, and that's based on something a lot of artists call box logic. Box logic. Right, and so what are these cylinders doing? Well, we see the bottom here and we can't see the top. So this means this is tilted back away from us, or it's going that way in space, away from us. Okay, so with a little bit of knowledge on how to work with cylinders, let's come back now and then one at a time, let's take each of these rectangles. So what is this first cylinder? Well, that first cylinder's sitting pretty level, isn't it? So it'd be represented probably something like this. With it being the bottom, we might be able to see down onto it a little bit. And then the second section, that's actually going away from us. So what we're going to do, let's see, is we're going to take this end and show the bottom. Right? It's leaning that way. And if we see the bottom, we can't see the top. Ah, so now we have more information than we did with the simple square, right? Not only do we know if it's leaning left or right, but now we know if it's leaning in or out. Then let's say this next section is more or less level. Right? So that's sticking more or less straight, going straight up and down, not tilting forward or not tilting backward. Then when we get here, this is actually coming towards us. So that'll go like that. Okay, I know if you wanted to sketch old growth oaks, this might go, what are we doing this? But it's understanding these simple shapes that are going to give you the ability to loosely sketch these things beautifully. I often sketch these things very quickly, but all of this understanding is going into that. Then let's continue to bring this forward with our next one. Whoops. Guess if we're bringing it forward, we can't see the bottom, can we? We see that. Okay, so that continues to come at us. Then when we split off here, that's going to go away from us. So in this one, we can see the bottom and not see the top. And then again, if we can continue that away from us. And what's happening with these cylinders? They're getting smaller too, aren't they? And let's continue away from us. Okay, so do you see how understanding and breaking these down into simple cylinders gives us the power to really see? But we have one more step, don't we? Because when we're sketching or painting, we're not always showing these lines. The bottom, it's not like we take a chainsaw and show it like this. And this is where light and shadow is going to come in. So if we come back to our paper towel, we see we've got the shadow on this side. And whatever it is here, whether it's 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, if this is the same shape, it's going to be the same here. Meaning it's going to be, let's say this is maybe 1/4. Well, this will be 1/4. Wow, how much figuring out did that just take away from us? And since we have a flat top here, we won't necessarily have this, but there's a cast shadow as well. Okay, what else do we see? Well, we see light on this side, and there's a little light hitting the top plane as well. So our shadow is going to be at least two planes, this side plane, and then the bottom plane we can't see, and that's expressed by the cast shadow right there. Now when that changes directions, notice that percentage of shadow changed drastically, didn't it? And not only that, what else is in shadow? Well, this bottom is in shadow here. And the contour is in another direction. And again, whatever it is on the bottom, it is here. But can you see how much less that is in the other? Well, that light shadow pattern combined with those gestures, and if we're seeing the top or the bottom, tell us which direction this is going in space, towards us or away from us. Okay? This can add tremendous richness to your drawings and paintings. Okay, so perhaps when you first saw this, you weren't thinking of that. Sometimes, if I say, hey, what's the gesture of that? Well, we pretty easily can, oh, it's something like that. Well, that's just the slightest preview, isn't it? Because that's really more interesting, isn't it? We start there, we go there. There's a lot more subtlety as we develop it into that, right? So that shape is more like that than that. And then for even more detail, we want to know at each point, not only is it leaning left or right, but again, is it coming towards us or going away from us? So if we only look at the tree and we take our drawing off of it, you know, that light and shadow pattern isn't necessarily there. It's kind of a gray day. You got the foliage on the top of it, casting shadows everywhere. But our job's never to draw what or paint what we see. Our job is to show what we see. So we want to show the viewer. So for instance, if we come to this first, that's straight up and down, and that light's got to come from somewhere, and we just need to decide where it's going to come from. It looks like to me it's coming from up above, but let's say it's coming from this direction. Right? Well, then what'll happen is this side will be shadow, and so will the bottom. Then here, as we turn away, as it goes away from us, this bottom will be in shadow. And then that side would be in shadow. Right? And that would be less. And then as we come up, there would be more shadow. And then as we come forward, we're seeing underneath. So all of that would be shadow. Okay, so that shadow shape goes from the most, which it's coming out towards us, so we're seeing the underneath, that's all shadowed or mostly shadowed, to straight up and down, to leaning back, to more straight up and down. So every time it's straight up and down, everything else being equal, what we should say is that proportion is about the same. And then when it changes from straight up and down, we need to change the proportion or how much of that cylinder is in shadow. Okay, that's a lot of talking. That is a lot of talking. How are we? Good, we've got 12 minutes left. So why don't we leave this and actually go to the sketchbook and see how this looks in real life. All right, how's everybody doing there? Is everybody okay, Sen?
Yeah.
Okay, any questions or anything coming through? Nope. All right, as always, we got Cindy here running the show in the background or the foreground, probably more accurate. Okay, so in the workshop, we will go over this in a little more detail, but you're also going to have the opportunity to roam the property with these old growth oaks, get your own pictures, your own reference, or sit out there and do your own sketches, and we'll get some feedback on that. All right, and that's coming up in be Atascadero, California at the end of this month, the end of April for 2022, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, so when I'm sketching, I don't care what medium I'm in, I like to get something that's lighter and darker. And all I mean by that is you see this here makes lighter marks, and this here makes darker marks. So it's like I have a chance to go in and figure it out and then make marks on top of it. So we're going to start with pen tonight, and then we might go to charcoal too. And let's think about that tree we just saw. Let's think about that tree we just saw. Was it something like that? Yeah, so I'm jumping ahead. This is going to be our fourth thing, but as we go through this, when I'm sketching, I try to imagine the movement, right? And the first thing is I try to get it in 2 dimensions, right? And instead of that, well, let's start there. That's going to go around, and then there's a little hitch, and it comes back up. Then when I say work across something, that simply means work perpendicular to it, right? So if this changes, my perpendicular changes. But the relationship between the line that's there and the going across is the same. And so this going across, sometimes we call that massing in. So if I lightly go across this, and we get smaller and smaller as we go, right? We're starting to get a mass instead of a line. Okay, so our first line is our movement or our gesture. And this is the basic procedure. So get your movement in there. Work across your movement for mass. And then the last thing is we want to contain the mass. Okay, so in a large way, we can think about these two as 2-dimensional, and then it's in the containment there that we want to make sure to get that 3rd dimension, or the depth. Okay, so we'll get into better abbreviations later, but let's stay clear now. So for right now, let's just work straight across this and think of as massing in. And our containment we can do with parentheses, right? If I was to write like the capital letter of my name, let's move this up a little bit, right? So J for Jason, and then if I put parentheses around it, well, that's all we need. And so if it's straight up and down, the parentheses will be like this. Then as it goes this way, right? So in other words, you were doing it right off the relationship of our line. And when it turns up, okay, you see how easy that can be? Now, what we're dealing with tonight is simple. You know, another way of saying simple is universal. Like, what's the biggest, simplest way we can comprehend this? And then what we're going to find is, after a little practice, the simply simple leaves us unsatisfied. It's really not enough. But we start with the simple, and then tomorrow night, what we're going to talk about is we go to the particular. In other words, instead of just a general cylinder, we want to talk about this particular tree. Right? And if we forget about the particular tree until we understand it simply, then it's actually very easy to get to the particular, right? The artist Steve Houston, a huge international teacher, he talks about simple yet characteristic. In other words, we want very simple shapes, but not so generic that we can't make out what it is. Okay, I'm using the word simple or universal and particular, but it's the same idea. But we're going to save that for tomorrow night. So the first of our 4 classes or sketch clubs, we're talking about simplifying and seeing simple, but that does not mean easy or even quick, because the simple includes the 3 dimensions, not just the 2. Okay, I know that was a lot and that was really fast, but man, we just don't have a ton of time here together. We just don't have a ton of time. So I can hang around for a couple of minutes if there's any questions. It's probably too early for questions because I imagine they're all going to be answered in the next couple of things. But if anybody's got any, shoot them out there. And if you're anywhere close to Central California, I hope you're able to make it in a couple of weeks. The property is really amazing. There's a Northlight studio for us to sit and study in the morning. And then there's old growth oaks throughout the property and the adjacent properties as well. Okay, and this is going to be a 3-day workshop, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Okay, so there'll be plenty of time for you to do your own work and get feedback, as well as me elaborate on this a little bit and talk more about the junction of these things. We're not going to be able to get too much into that, but we'll talk about bending and twisting and all of that good stuff. Oh, look, there's a teenager right there. Oh, she's got delayed. So there you go, Claudia. There we go. And there's it, Sin.
Hi, guys.
For old school, coming back. I can't believe it's been so long since we were doing this 3 or 4 times a week. So, Jenny, yeah. So, Jenny says hi, Izzy.
Hello.
Jenny, we wish you were there too. Yes, Shakti's going to be there. I know there's a few of you already there. So, if you're able, contact Cindy and she'll get you all signed up.
I did put the link in the chat too.
And the link is in the chat, and I'm sure there'll be links in the description as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, I hope I didn't move too fast tonight, but I want to respect everybody's time and just give you a little taste of what's coming up in the workshops and perhaps the online courses too. As I've been taking a break, I've been developing a lot of my own artistic material as well as some teaching material. So some of that teaching stuff will seep out a little bit this year, and then next year I think we're going to make a big launch. It just takes a little longer, or a lot longer. All right, everybody. Well, we'll call it an evening. It's great to see you. Thank you all for showing up, and I hope to see you guys again tomorrow night. Bye, everybody. Thank you.